The transport vessel from the Galactic Concorde drifted through Earth's outer atmosphere like a silent speck against an ocean of clouds. Overseer Danash stood at the observation bay, a tall silhouette with pale blue scales that shimmered under the dim lights. Beside them, investigators Nye, shorter, with a flexible physique that allowed subtle shape-shifting, jotted down notes on a handheld device that displayed lines of incomprehensible alien script. Enforcer Vel, massive and broad-shouldered, loomed in the background with arms crossed, prepared for any threat. The final member of their team, the AI Nox, was merely a glowing panel integrated into the walls of the vessel, pulsing quietly with each data input. All of them gazed toward the swirling clouds that concealed this so-called death world. They had read the preliminary reports. Human civilization, from a purely technological standpoint, was somewhere in the middle of the galactic pack. Spaceflight limited to their own solar system, basic nuclear energy, advanced digital networks. But Earth itself was known to be exceptionally volatile. Storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and wildlife evolved for predatory aggression. By every measure, it was a planet that should have forced its inhabitants into docility or extinction. Yet humanity thrived here, and not only survived, but apparently embraced an entire array of perilous activities, both natural and self-inflicted. Danash flicked their eyes to the readouts. Everything about Earth's composition read as relatively standard for a Class M environment, if more tumultuous than most. The puzzle was not in the planet's atmospheric composition, but in the creatures that claimed supremacy over it. The question from the Galactic Concorde was clear. Should these humans be considered worthy of membership, or did their behavior present too great a risk to the peaceful cosmic order? The vessel descended undetected, courtesy of stealth technology far surpassing anything Earth possessed. They settled outside a major urban center, the outskirts of a city recognized on charts simply as New York. Because Earth's current level of technology made them easy to hide from, the mission demanded direct observation. Each member of the team had studied countless hours of recorded human broadcasts, documentaries, news, entertainment. But they were all aware that real life rarely matched curated footage. They landed under a moonlit sky, their vessel cloaked among thick foliage. Even here, faint lights of the nearby metropolis glowed like a sea of stars on the horizon. Over the faint hum of the ship's cooling systems, they could hear human civilization, the distant buzz of traffic, the hum of power lines, the low rumble of machines. None of the 3 living members disembarked immediately. Danash pressed a taloned fingertip to the side of their head, cycling through the last instructions from the Concorde. Vel tapped a mechanical brace on his left forearm that extended a compact scanning device. Xenai drew the collar of a disguised garment tighter, preparing to shift their outward appearance to match a typical human silhouette. All systems ready, Knox announced in a soothing voice. No local detection measures have been triggered. We proceed, said Danash, voice low and careful. Remember the directive, collect data. Determine if humans pose a risk or an opportunity. Maintain minimal contact. Observe. They exited the craft, stepping onto Earth's soil. The air was cool, tinged with moisture and the faint scent of exhaust. They walked a short distance through tall grass until they reached a road. Hovering near the edge, they waited. A single car passed, its headlights illuminating them for a moment. To the human driver's eyes, if the driver bothered to look closely, the group would have seemed like 4 people standing quietly in the shadows. In truth, only Xenai's shape would register as genuinely human. Danash wore a holographic veil that approximated a slender, middle-aged figure with a stern face. Vel had also taken on a broad, muscular semblance of a human male with features that discouraged approach. Xenai could shift more fluidly, so they assumed a nondescript youthful form. They had practiced these illusions extensively on the vessel. At once, the entire group halted. Across the street lay a warehouse building of sorts, its flat rooftop accessible by a metal staircase. 3 humans had climbed to the top, carrying cameras strapped to their chests. The overhead lampposts revealed them silhouetted against the night sky. They appear to be filming themselves, Zenai whispered. Danesh raised a small monocular to their face. Yes, they are. But what are they planning to do at that height? The next moment answered the question. One of the humans sprinted to the roof's edge, leaped across an impossible gap toward an adjacent building, and landed with a roll on the far side. The second building was slightly lower, but the distance was still breathtaking. The watchers from the Concorde felt a collective jolt of alarm. Knox's mechanical eye flickered, trying to process how this lethal drop was being treated so casually. The second human followed, stumbling slightly on the landing, but laughing hysterically. The third hooped with excitement, apparently celebrating the near miss as though it were a glorious success. All of them were clearly exhilarated, beaming wide grins. They exchanged fist bumps or some form of celebratory gestures. They're risking their lives for a recording? Vel's deep voice rumbled with disbelief. We should investigate this further. This is not an official contact scenario, Danesh reminded him sternly. We observe from a distance first. Let's remain unseen. They continued watching. The humans repeated these death-defying leaps, capturing every moment with their cameras. When a trio finally hopped back down via another set of precarious ledges, they wandered off in the night, still joking about how epic the footage would be. Once they were gone, the alien observers shared a stunned silence. Knox whispered through the portable device. I am detecting a complete absence of professional rescue equipment or safety nets. They appear unconcerned about potential fatal outcomes. Zenai sighed. So the rumors were true. This species does not behave as if they value safety above all else. Danesh exhaled, adjusting their holographic veil as a passing car's headlights swept across them. Let's proceed to the city. I want more context before we draw any conclusions. Their plan was to find vantage points around the city, gather initial observations overnight, then regroup by dawn. They had mapped several spots that promised comprehensive views of human behavior. The center of the metropolis beckoned with tall skyscrapers, bright lights, and crowds, perhaps the best place to see how humans really lived. So they walked along empty streets, occasionally passing a homeless individual asleep on a bench, or a group of late-night revelers shouting and laughing as they stumbled out of bars. Everything about this environment felt unpredictable. Cars whizzed by at speeds that made little sense to Vel, whose entire mentality revolved around structured caution in a warlike universe. Here, it seemed, accidents were daily hazards, yet no one showed the kind of dread an off-worlder might expect. One vehicle screeched to a stop at an intersection, nearly hitting a pedestrian who was crossing against the signal. Instead of terror, the pedestrian banged on the car's hood, shouted an insult, and continued walking. The driver responded with an irate honk before speeding off. It was a chaotic ballet of near-death moments. They settled at a vantage point near a busy square, Times Square, if the data from their vessel was correct. Massive electronic billboards flashed overhead, advertising everything from beverages to musicals. Humans crowded the sidewalks, each group or individual seemingly lost in their own world of thoughts. Some stared down at handheld devices while weaving through throngs of people. Others took selfies at the intersections, oblivious to the swirling traffic around them. Zenai peered around, wide-eyed. They're so immersed in stimuli. Lights, noise, movement. How do they process so much chaos? Vel scanned the crowd and muttered. They don't seem to fear the possibility of violence or disaster. Look at that one. He pointed discreetly. A street performer breathed fire mere feet from passers-by, who paused to clap or drop currency into a bucket. Fire in a crowded place. Where's the caution? Danesh carefully recorded footage to show the Concorde. He felt an uncomfortable stirring in his chest. All these humans, from the daredevils leaping across rooftops to the street performers spitting flames, acted as though they were doing nothing unusual. In their minds, it was perfectly normal. That, he realized, was perhaps the most unsettling aspect. They had no sense that they were flouting logic at every turn. When they finally left Times Square, the night wore on. They encountered smaller pockets of activity, a group of teenagers skateboarding and grinding rails at 2 in the morning, a group of friends perched on the edge of a bridge, legs dangling hundreds of feet above the water, apparently just for the thrill of it. Danash and the others had to forcibly resist the urge to intervene, to drag these humans back from the brink of self-destruction. They retreated in the early hours before sunrise, returning to their cloaked vessel on the city's perimeter to consolidate findings. Knox's audio relays replayed the scenes they'd witnessed, and each new vantage left the aliens more perplexed. By the time they reconvened in the ship's main cabin, the outlines of a question were forming. Was humanity's disregard for personal safety symptomatic of something deeper and more dangerous? Xeni typed rapidly on a console. I'd like to do deeper infiltration. Perhaps speak with them more openly. Well, disguised, of course. That would violate the minimal contact protocol, Danash cautioned. Vel's voice rumbled with discontent. But we must clarify. We've seen them risk death for excitement. Maybe they do the same with war. Could they be the most unpredictable threat we've encountered? Danash paused, recalling the incident with the rooftop jumpers, the endless traffic hazards, the casual stunts. All right, tomorrow, after we rest, we each approach a different aspect of this society. But do not reveal yourselves. And if anything endangers our mission, retreat immediately. Knox's next statement, quietly echoing through the ship's speakers, made them all uneasy. Statistical likelihood of confusion remains high. Proceed with caution. They rested fitfully, as though even in dreams they heard the roar of engines and glimpsed humans flinging themselves into risk. At daybreak, they set out again. Xeni traveled alone, stepping off the ship in full disguise, adopting the mannerisms of a casual tourist. On a whim, or perhaps guided by some glimmer of curiosity, they wandered into a sports bar. It was mid-morning, yet patrons were already yelling at large screens showing highlights of boxing matches and extreme sports. The clink of glasses punctuated the commentary from multiple TV sets. Nobody seemed to think it odd that a stranger had entered. Xeni found a seat at the bar, observing the swirl of banter and bravado. A large screen above the counter displayed replays of a mixed martial arts bout. Two humans pummeled each other with fists, elbows, and knees, the crowd cheering with every strike. Blood sprayed across the ring, and the fighters refused to quit until one was knocked nearly unconscious. Xeni felt a churn in their stomach. Combat was not unusual in the galaxy. Conflicts were common enough. But turning it into sport, cheering for the spectacle of potential brain damage, seemed especially macabre. Xeni discreetly recorded the crowd's reactions as they roared each time a fighter took a damaging blow. Then, with equal fervor, they applauded the post-match respect, where the fighters embraced, praising each other's skill. It was contradictory and strange, violence followed by camaraderie. A voice broke Xeni's concentration. First time here. The bartender, a woman wearing a shirt that said, "Live, Fearless," gestured to Xeni's empty glass. "Wallaby, whatever's popular," Xeni replied. They had practiced this line to avoid suspicion. With a quick nod, the bartender poured a golden liquid into a tall glass. Xeni eyed it warily. Humans often consumed mild toxins, alcohol, for recreational purposes. This practice alone indicated a willingness to impair their senses on purpose. Xeni took a sip and felt a burning warmth that spread across their chest. It was surprisingly pleasant. Just then, a rowdy fan who had been watching the fights slapped the counter and turned to Xeni, noticing the concealed device they carried. "You filming something?" the fan asked, voice slurred with drink. "I was just making some personal notes," Xeni explained cautiously. "I'm new in town, studying human culture." The drunk fan laughed, clapping Xeni on the shoulder. "You picked a hell of a place to start. Human culture is about going hard or going home, right? Look at those two." They pointed at the screen. "They'll beat the tar out of each other, and then they'll grab beers like best friends. It's about respect, man. You step in the ring, you risk it all, you earn your stripes." Xeni nodded politely, though inside they reeled. "That's admirable," they managed. "And what about the risk of permanent injury?" "PSH, that's the game," the fan replied. We do it for pride, for excitement. Life's too short to worry about every bruise. It wasn't just the content of the words, but the casual acceptance of danger that made Zenai's disguise tingle with unease. Nonetheless, they forced a smile and returned to sipping the drink. This was precisely the kind of candid viewpoint they needed. Meanwhile, Dinesh and Vel ventured into the heart of the city. They took a crowded subway, pressed shoulder to shoulder with humans. Vel glowered at the minimal personal space, but no one else seemed bothered. At one stop, a young man with a guitar hopped on and began to sing at full volume, hat extended for tips. Around them, at least half the passengers wore earbuds or headphones, ignoring their surroundings. The rest scrolled through phones or dozed off. How can they be so relaxed in a metal tube, hurtling underground? Vel muttered. Any mechanical fault could be lethal. Dinesh shrugged. It's routine for them. Familiarity breeds confidence. We have to keep an open mind. When they emerged from the subway, they found themselves near a towering office building. At ground level, a sign read, "Bungee jump off the urban tower, weekends only." They stared in disbelief at the promotional image. People leaping off a tall platform near the top floor, attached only by an elastic cord. Dinesh quickly cross-checked the building's height. Well over 200 meters. This must be a mistake, Vel said, scanning the sign. Why would anyone do that? But it was no mistake. A staff member wearing a harness cheerfully explained to a cluster of tourists how thrilling the jump would be. You're gonna love the rush, he announced. Nothing beats that free fall. Just trust the cord. Trust the cord, Dinesh thought, not quite comprehending how a species could place faith in a slender rope over a 200-meter drop. Yet no one seemed alarmed. They were excited, even lined up, paying money to experience it. Dinesh recorded some footage while Vel clenched his fists, barely concealing his outrage at such reckless behavior. The crowd's chatter was enthusiastic, filled with phrases like, "I have to do this before I die," and "I can't wait to tell everyone back home." Before the aliens' very eyes, a middle-aged woman stepped up to the platform, arms outstretched. With a whoop, she launched herself into the void. She vanished over the edge, only to bounce back seconds later, shrieking with laughter. Onlookers applauded as she dangled, a grin splitting her face when she was hoisted back to the platform. At that moment, Dinesh's portable device buzzed. Zenai had sent a message. "We must reconvene. I've discovered a name, Ambassador Joyce Cole. She apparently handles off-world relations. The humans do have some official arrangement to discuss membership in the Concord." Dinesh and Vel left the bungee site with relief, making their way to the rendezvous. The more they witnessed, the more they felt that they needed official answers. No single interview or snippet of footage could explain humanity's fearless approach. They met Zenai in a small park at the edge of the city. Zenai looked shaken, but also oddly exhilarated. They're unbelievably contradictory. They fight for fun. They jump from buildings for sport. Then they donate to charities, celebrate heroic rescues, care about each other's pain. It's as though they compartmentalize danger into recreation. Vel grunted. That kind of compartmentalization could be lethal if turned against us. Imagine an entire species that shrugs off mortal peril. They'd be unstoppable in a conflict, assuming they have the technology or if they eventually develop it. Dinesh sighed. The question remains, are they a danger to others or only to themselves? Let's find Ambassador Cole. Tracking down Cole wasn't difficult, thanks to human public records. She was scheduled to speak at an upcoming meeting in the newly established Interstellar Diplomatic Office. The Concord had, apparently, left behind a minimal staff to keep watch on Earth, but membership was still in its earliest phases. The official meeting was set for 2 days from now. The team decided to expedite the process by introducing themselves in a quiet, less public environment first. They arrived at a sleek, modern building designated for Earth's budding diplomatic relations with alien civilizations. A handful of staff milled about in the lobby, none the wiser to the presence of disguised extraterrestrials. They asked the front desk to meet with Ambassador Cole regarding the Galactic Concord Initiative. Within minutes, they were ushered into a modest but comfortable office. Diplomatic flags of Earth's nations lined the walls, and the windows overlooked the shimmering skyline. Joyce Cole stood from behind her desk, extending a hand with a professional smile. She wore a tailored suit, and though her expression was cordial, there was a certain sharpness in her gaze. Danash and the others exchanged uncertain glances before Danash finally accepted the handshake, remembering that humans used this gesture as a greeting. "Welcome," Cole said. "I've been expecting more visitors from off-world eventually, though I didn't realize we had a scheduled appointment. Pleased to meet you." Danash cleared his throat. "We are observers. We wish to learn more about your species in preparation for the upcoming membership discussions." Cole's eyes flicked over them with keen interest. "Oh, well, I'm happy to help. Earth is eager to prove we're ready to join the broader galactic community. Please have a seat." They settled in chairs that were a bit cramped for Vel's large frame. Cole took her own seat behind the desk. "So, what's on your mind? I can guess you've been exploring the city. You look a bit unsettled, if you don't mind me saying so." Vel shifted uncomfortably. "We have witnessed many risk-laden activities. Do you realize your citizens are routinely leaping off high structures, racing vehicles at reckless speeds, entering physical combat for entertainment?" A wry smile tugged at the corner of Cole's mouth. "That's part of the reason you think we might not be safe." "Members of the galaxy?" Danash nodded. "It's perplexing. Why embrace so much danger? It contradicts typical survival logic." Cole leaned forward, folding her hands. "Earth is a planet that tries to kill us all the time. Hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, earthquakes, you name it. For centuries, we were at nature's mercy. Somewhere along the line, we realized we could adapt, push back, even find ways to laugh in the face of danger. For us, it's normal. Maybe that normal is terrifying to the rest of the galaxy. I can understand that. But it's how we've always lived." Xenai raised a tentative hand, unsure of Earth's formalities. "What about conflict? We've seen references to wars, violence, brutality in your histories. Are you not concerned that your species has a destructive streak?" Cole's smile dimmed, replaced by a somber expression. "We do. That's true. We've had terrible wars. Our destructive capacity has come close to wiping us out multiple times. It's something we work very hard to control. We still make mistakes, but we're learning. Our membership in the Concord is partly to ensure we keep ourselves in check, that we learn from more advanced civilizations who might help us avoid repeating past calamities." Does that sound menacing? She studied them carefully, as if reading their reactions. Vel opened his mouth, but Danash answered first. "Menacing, no. Conflicting, yes. You risk your lives for entertainment, yet you also express profound compassion. You show technological advancement, yet remain content with dangerous living conditions. We can't predict you." Cole tapped her fingers on the desk, as though thinking of a suitable explanation. "Humans have a saying, we only truly live when we push our limits. That can manifest in healthy ways, exploration, athletics, scientific breakthroughs. Or it can manifest in conflict, greed, power struggles. Our greatest challenge is channeling that drive into constructive pursuits. Some folks jump off bridges attached to bungee cords because they crave an adrenaline rush, but they're not hurting anyone else. Others climb mountains simply because they exist. It's about testing ourselves, proving we can endure." Danash felt an unexpected pang of admiration, something that unsettled him further. "Would you allow us to see more examples of constructive pursuits, not just the adrenaline-based ones?" Cole stood, nodding. "Of course. Tomorrow, I'll be happy to give you a tour. We have areas dedicated to humanitarian aid, environmental conservation, advanced research. Not everything we do is about flirting with death. However," she added, "you'll likely see more of that adventurous streak, no matter where we go. It's part of who we are." They parted ways with plans to meet again the next day. Outside on the street, the team regrouped. Each was filled with conflicting impressions. Humanity was reckless, yes, but also cooperative, inventive, curious. If they were accepted into the Concord, what ripple effects might that bring? They returned to their vessel once more to rest, each grappling with their own thoughts. Vel paced in the corridor, voice low with worry. These people could become unstoppable if they gain advanced technology. They push themselves so far with such limited means already. Imagine if they had weaponry that matched their fearlessness. Dinesh didn't disagree, but also remembered the moments of compassion in the city. People rushing to help a fallen cyclist, or the way they cheered for a battered boxer, not just for violence, but for triumph over adversity. We must assess thoroughly, he said. Let's see what Cole shows us. Then we'll report to the Concord. The next day, they met Cole at a bustling administrative complex. True to her word, she took them to a bright research facility where doctors and scientists were hard at work on cures for diseases. They passed lab after lab filled with humans wearing protective gear, carefully mixing chemicals in beakers or peering into microscopes. One scientist enthusiastically explained a new vaccine for a disease that still plagued parts of Earth's population. Dinesh noted how they expressed unwavering optimism about defeating illnesses. Even though they had not yet eradicated all diseases, they displayed no sense of resignation. Instead, they were confident they would succeed in time. That drive mirrored the unstoppable nature they had seen in the thrill seekers, but turned toward a benevolent goal. From the research facility, Cole led them to an environmental conservation center. Here, teams of volunteers worked to rehabilitate injured wildlife. In one enclosure, a massive eagle with a broken wing hopped nervously. A woman gently fed the bird, ensuring it would heal and eventually be released back into the wild. The caretaker explained that humans had once hunted certain species to near extinction but were now trying to reverse the damage. The predators, once enemies to be eradicated, were recognized as vital to Earth's ecosystem. Doesn't that worry you? Zenai asked the caretaker, helping a dangerous animal recover to full strength. The caretaker laughed softly. Sure, an eagle's talons can be nasty, but it's our responsibility. We share this planet. If we can help a creature survive, we do it. Even Vel's hardened gaze softened at that. It was a side of humanity that spoke to guardianship rather than recklessness. But not too far from this center, they could see a fenced-off section where visitors handled large reptiles, some highly venomous, with minimal protective gear. Cole explained it was an educational program to teach people about dangerous animals. Vel only shook his head, unsure whether to applaud their bravery or question their sanity. They spent hours touring these facilities, seeing countless examples of human dedication to progress and preservation. Then, just as their impressions were beginning to lean more favorably, another spectacle reminded them how quickly humans could shift back to casual peril. Across the street from the conservation center, a half-collapsed building was being demolished. Instead of cordoning off a wide radius or employing robotic demolition, a group of workers with heavy machinery slammed a wrecking ball into the structure. Onlookers gathered behind flimsy barricades, cheering each time the old walls crumbled in a storm of dust. Cole rubbed the back of her neck. We do love to watch destruction, even when it's controlled and purposeful. That's probably something else that confuses you. But that building was condemned after a fire. We're taking it down to make way for something new. Dinesh coughed in the dusty air. Why do people stand so close? The rubble could cause injuries. Cole shrugged with a small smile. It's an event for them, a chance to witness transformation. Thus, the contradictions persisted. As they made their way back, Cole informed them about the official Concord membership meeting scheduled for the following morning. I hope you'll be there. It's an open session, though obviously we prefer to keep it organized. I think you'll get to see how other alien representatives react to Earth's proposal. We will attend, Dinesh said, seeing no other choice. It may well decide Earth's future in galactic affairs. That night, the three found themselves in the vessel's briefing room, reviewing hours of footage. Scenes of humanitarian kindness overlapped with footage of violent sports, comedic pranks overshadowed by examples of scientific brilliance. Their sense of confusion only deepened, but so did a strange sense of reluctant admiration. This species is so deeply contradictory, Zenai mused softly. I don't know whether to fear them or cheer them on. Vel let out a low rumble. They treat lethal danger like a game, but they also treat each other's well-being with surprising seriousness. If they unify those traits with advanced technology, they might surpass every civilization in the Concord, or they might tear themselves apart. Dinesh nodded. We'll present our findings at the meeting if asked, but we must remain factual. Let's ensure we have the data laid out. No speculation without evidence. Morning came too soon. The building that housed the membership meeting was newly outfitted for multi-species gatherings. Inside, there were delegates from across the galaxy, tall, wispy beings from the Mavari cluster, scale Veloxians from the Rim Quadrant, even a few heavily tentacled Rith explorers. Earth's representatives were noticeably fewer in number, but the entire place buzzed with anticipation. The meeting commenced with standard formalities. A senior official from the Concord introduced the session and reminded everyone that Earth's request for membership had reached a critical juncture. Reports from the observer team were now vital to the final vote. Dinesh, Vel, and Xenai stepped forward when summoned. Their natural appearances were startling in such a public space, but they spoke with calm authority, describing in measured detail the extremes they had witnessed. Humans leaping off high structures for fun, risking their lives in sports, occasionally engaging in petty bar fights, driving recklessly. As the data played out on holographic screens, many delegates gasped or hissed in dismay. Then came the more benign footage. Doctors saving lives, volunteers rescuing animals, scientists engineering solutions to global problems. Gasps of horror turned into murmurs of intrigue. The footage continued, a stark juxtaposition that left the hall in an uneasy hush by the end. Dinesh concluded, this species appears to thrive on challenge. Pain, fear, and even near-certain death do not deter them. Instead, they adapt rapidly and even find pleasure or meaning in adversity. They'll step forward, voice resonant. In conflict, they might be unstoppable if their survival instincts are as fluid as their disregard for danger. They have waged devastating wars among themselves in the past. They speak now of peace, but we have observed their capacity for violence remains. A swirl of anxious voices filled the auditorium. Representatives argued among themselves. Some want an immediate ban on Earth's membership, citing unpredictability. Others pointed to the potential for human courage and innovation as a valuable asset. Then Ambassador Cole walked calmly onto the stage. The hush was instantaneous. Her presence seemed to carry the same calm self-assurance the observer team had come to associate with her. She thanked the Concord for the chance to speak and address the footage shown by Dinesh, Vel, and Xenai. Everything you saw is genuine, she said, voice firm but warm. We can't deny we do dangerous things, that we have internal conflicts, and that we push boundaries in ways that might seem irrational or terrifying. But humanity is also the species that came together to protect each other during catastrophic earthquakes, tsunamis, pandemics. We're the ones who look at Mount Everest, the highest point on our planet, and say, let's climb it. We're the ones who looked up at the stars, built rockets out of metal scraps, and decided to step onto our moon, even though the odds of survival were not guaranteed. She let that statement sink in. We know fear. We're not ignorant of it. We feel it every day, but we've learned to harness it. We push ourselves to see what we can achieve. Sometimes that leads us astray, wars, abuses of power, but we also learn, and each generation tries to do better than the last. Another hush fell. One delegate asked, what if your thirst for challenge turns outward, toward us? Would you wage war on other worlds just to prove your might? Cole shook her head. We've seen enough war at home to know we don't want more. Our greatest victories now come from cooperating with each other, and, we hope, with the rest of the galaxy. We believe that same drive that leads us to risk ourselves could also lead us to take risks for others, to rescue, to explore, to discover solutions that benefit everyone. She paused, then smiled ruefully. But I won't lie to you, we do think we're normal. We grew up in storms, in the presence of predators, and found ways to enjoy the ride. That might be the scariest part for you. We understand that. We can't change what shaped us. We can only assure you that we want to channel our resilience and daring into a shared future, not destructive conquest. In the silence that followed, a slow ripple of applause began. One of the elder delegates from a distant star system spoke up, describing how humans had already assisted them in a minor ecological crisis, sending teams of scientists to help with a poison water supply. Another mentioned a human-led philanthropic venture that had offered resources after a meteor strike on a small colony world. These instances painted a broader picture of a species as quick to jump into a rescue as they were to jump off a bridge. One by one, delegates either expressed cautious optimism or lingering skepticism. Eventually, the Concord official called for a vote. The result took several tense minutes, but the decision was made. Earth would be granted provisional membership, subject to ongoing observation and certain treaties that restricted advanced weapon development without Concord oversight. Cole released a quiet breath of relief, smiling in gratitude. When she caught sight of Danash, Vel, and Zenai, she gave them a polite nod. Their expressions were mixed: relief, amazement, maybe a flicker of dread. They had presented all the evidence that could have doomed Earth's chances, but here was the final verdict. Acceptance, albeit a cautious one. The meeting dispersed in a flurry of excitement and discussion. Delegates crowded around Cole, some offering handshakes or alien equivalents, others approaching with guarded curiosity. Danash, Vel, and Zenai stepped back to watch. They couldn't deny a sense of wonder at how Cole had managed to defuse the tension. In private, Zenai murmured, "Is that not a sign of their power? To pivot so gracefully, to reframe their unpredictability as a virtue." Vel exhaled. "It's a skill, certainly. Let's hope they use it for constructive ends." They found Cole later in the corridor, away from the throng of delegates. She greeted them with the same calm smile. "I wanted to thank you for being honest in your report. I know it painted us in a strange light, but you didn't hide the good we do either." Danash inclined his head. "We strive for accuracy above all else. The final decision rests on the Concord's judgment. It seems they have allowed your world a chance." Cole nodded. "We'll do our best not to let anyone down. Of course, we'll keep doing our normal human activities, so I imagine you'll still find plenty to puzzle over. That's part of who we are." Zenai hesitated, then asked, "Why do your people see yourselves as normal? Surely, you recognize how unusual it is to risk your life so freely." Cole offered a small chuckle. "Maybe some of us do, but from our first breath, we're taught to roll with the punches. That could mean climbing a tree we might fall from, learning to ride a bike even though we could crash, or traveling across an ocean in a fragile boat. So by the time we're adults, jumping out of a plane with a parachute doesn't feel that insane. We adapt so thoroughly that we forget there was ever a time we couldn't handle it." Vel snorted softly. "That's what makes you terrifying. You adapt to mortal danger as if it's a casual inconvenience." Cole's eyes glinted with understanding. "Yes, that's the whole story right there. The most terrifying thing about humans? We think we're normal. But now that we're stepping onto the galactic stage, we'll learn from you. And maybe you'll learn from us." With that, she shook their hands one by one, no hint of fear or hesitation. The three aliens left the building in silence, returning to their vessel with a sense of closure and yet an inkling that this was only the beginning. On the flight deck, Knox compiled the final transmissions. Earth's membership was official, so the observer team's job was done for now. On the way back, they witnessed another typical day in the city. A group of base jumpers preparing to leap off a skyscraper with bright parachutes. A charity marathon where countless participants pushed themselves to the brink of exhaustion, and a restaurant offering ghost pepper challenges so spicy they could cause physical distress. Every corner they turned revealed more extremes. Fun mixed with risk, empathy mingled with recklessness. As the vessel ascended into the sky, Danash let out a long breath. "We'll have to file a complete analysis. The Concord will want updates." Zenai settled into a seat. "I'm sure some members of the Concord would be fascinated to see what we've seen. Or horrified." Vel placed a hand on a control panel. "They survived everything this planet threw at them. That alone is extraordinary." Danash keyed in the sequence to cloak the ship, drifting higher into the atmosphere until Earth became a curvature of blues and whites below. Let's finalize our official stance. Extremely dangerous if provoked, possessed of unusual resilience, and yet guided by empathy. A lethal yet caring species. I suppose that's the paradox of humanity. Knox's voice chimed in with finality. Updated log. Humans recognized as valuable allies, provided their normal remains anchored in goodwill. Through the forward viewport, the bright sphere of Earth glowed peacefully, an ironic contrast to all the turmoil and intensity that existed at ground level. Vel stared at the planet. In war, he had faced monstrous foes with advanced weapons who cowered when threatened by the slightest personal risk. These humans, by contrast, might stand firm even when outmatched, simply because they believed they could. They set a course to rendezvous with a Concorde cruiser waiting in the outer system. Behind them, Earth shrank in the viewport, but its impression remained vast in their minds. They had learned, with no small measure of alarm and admiration, the humans would chase excitement, stare down fear, and call it life. They had learned that in the midst of near-death experiences, these people laughed, cried, and built communities that thrived in adversity. And most unnerving of all, they had learned that humans believed all of this to be perfectly ordinary. Down below, in the city that never slept, life continued much the same. A skydiving team soared over farmland. Farther west, surfers sought the biggest waves along a storm-tossed shore. A child in a quiet suburban street tried out their bicycle's first big ramp. And somewhere within a bustling fire station, men and women stood ready to dash into flames to save lives. It was precisely the kind of day humans thought of as normal. All the while, a single line spoken by Cole echoed in Dinash's mind. We only truly live when we push our limits. Perhaps that was the key to understanding them. Humanity's power came not only from a lack of fear, but from an active choice to face it, and frequently to laugh in its face. As the craft accelerated away, each observer settled into reflection. Zenai replayed an image of the beaming face of a bar patron after winning a reckless food challenge. Vel ruminated on the stoic courage of soldiers who had served in human armies, fighting even when the odds were dire. Danash compiled a lengthy summary for the Concorde. The humans will continue to surprise us in ways both wondrous and alarming. They do not see themselves as special, but in that very lack of self-awareness lies the root of their extraordinary resilience and potential hazard. Had they wanted to, the observers could have lingered in orbit, scanning the planet for more examples. But they already had more than enough evidence. Perhaps time would make sense of these contradictions, or perhaps the entire galaxy was about to become well acquainted with a species that balanced on the razor's edge between self-destruction and triumphant progress. No one said much as the vessel broke free of Earth's gravitational pull. The AI Nox hummed quietly, finishing its final background calculations. After all these experiences, it had only one last note for the official record, which it recited in a measured voice. They have declared themselves normal. We have confirmed they are anything but. End log. And somewhere below, in a city street or a remote wilderness or an adrenaline-packed stadium, a human was probably doing something terrifyingly fearless, absolutely certain it was just another day.